Hello, beautiful people. My name is Eric Piccioni. I was a former collegiate kicker and punter, and now I train kickers and punters and generally athletes all over the world on how to kick, punt, be better with their mind, and like personal development stuff and all that fun stuff. So today's topic is going to cover journaling, the importance of it, why you should do it, what you can get out of it, and like personal experiences, practical takeaways, and everything that you can see in your daily life. And hopefully at the end of the video, you see the value of journaling and you take yourself up on it. So just to give yourself an idea of the power of it, I was a okay college kicker. Coming out of high school, I was what I would consider pretty successful. I did pretty well for myself, won some all-state awards and was all-conference and all that fun stuff. And then I came into college and I didn't really have any guidance or of an understanding of really what I needed to do to be better on a day-to-day basis. So over time, I was learning that the elite NFL kickers and punters and athletes all over the world were taking a really big priority on like journaling and taking a note of their progress mentally through different tactics and strategies around journaling. So one of the simplest things that I started doing is writing down my thoughts, my goals, my mindset after each practice, and just kept a running log of that over a long enough period of time. I started to realize that there's a lot of value in journaling. And that's what this topic is going to cover today, is like the value of journaling and where it can fit into your daily life. And I've definitely saw a night and day difference from my mindset on a consistent practice and game basis, just because I was simply writing down my thoughts. My journal log was extensive in the sense that there was a lot of raw thoughts. So I could go back to that at a future point and realize what I did or didn't do that made me good or not that good that day. So over a long enough time, I had data so that I could refer back to it and give myself clear points of what I needed to do or what I did that made me so successful. So we'll cover that in a second, in a bit. And just a real quick shameless plug, if you find any value in this or any of the things that I've touched on in the past, please consider subscribing. Do yourself a huge favor, because the bigger that this channel gets, the more of an impact it can make to others around the world that may not have the resources, they may not have the direct coaching or guidance that they are looking for. And who knows, this could change someone's life. So I really hope that you can subscribe if you're not already, because over 80% of the people that watch this channel aren't subscribed and they're more so passing through. So I would love the opportunity to become one of the familiar voices that helps you along in your journey towards a better personal development life and like a long-term standing in terms of success, whether that's athletically or just long-term. So thank you so much, and we'll jump right into the video. So in a nutshell, journaling is such a wide topic or general topic that gets tossed around a lot. And the purpose of it, in my opinion, is to write down any sort of thought that you're experiencing or things that you want to keep hold of or record of for the long term. And this could be a bunch of different things, like gratitude journals, writing down what you're grateful for. This could be a training journal for your athletic achievements or successes on a consistent basis, workout journal, how you did your workouts that day or that week or that month or whatever. Your eating log, what you ate on the day. It could be a freehand journal, like a stream of consciousness journal where you just write down whatever comes to mind. Or it could be everything all bundled together, kind of how I do it. It's like a hodgepodge of thoughts that I just sort of throw in at time to time. If I'm reading a book and I want to take note of a really important key point and reference it later, like I do that. So it doesn't have to be like one specific purpose. You could have just a one-off training journal. And, if you're like me, I like to have the paper version. So I have a bunch of different styles of journals, more so for like one-off things. But for the most part, across the wide scope of things, like I have one journal that covers really everything now. And then if it's like something related to fitness or it might be tough to track down one specific thing, I would just have a virtual version of that. So in a workout format or in a training format, something like that, I want to have a virtual version that I can reference at a future date so that I can see, okay, on May 27th, 2023, I did XYZ and I felt XYZ. Something really practical that you can use to see your tangible progress. And that could be, like I said, virtual, but I kind of find a mix of both where I do the physical first and then take my keynotes to a virtual version, because likely I don't really want to skim through hundreds of books to find that one key point that I thought was valuable in a virtual setting. I could just skim it real quick and Control F or like find the exact key point through a key search on my phone or my computer, and then it pulls up everything. So just a quick side note, I read a lot of books. So one thing that I've done is I, highlight and write a table of contents in the beginning of the book of things that I found valuable, write them on a note card, and then take within those note cards like the key points of a book, put it in a Google Doc so I can reference it in the future. And now I have like hundreds of pages of books that I can reference, and I can say, I want to learn about confidence or mindset or being more present. I can just Control F, find it immediately. And then out of all the books, these are the 12 different segments or sentences that I've found relative to that exact key term. And that helps a lot. So in terms of like being an athlete or kicker, punter, or really any sport, you could find a key point around your mindset in a virtual setting and say, what was the time that I did something that I want to reference back to in the future around confidence, right? And that's a practical takeaway that I would say would be worthwhile. And there are a lot of benefits to journaling. I've covered quite a few in some other videos and blog posts and things like that. But just to sum it up, the main benefits for me revolve around like improving focus, keeping track of things, managing stress. For me personally, what gets measured gets managed. So if you're able to put it down into a key format or like some type of document that you can reference in the future, that will help you with problem solving. It'll help you remember your like top performing moments. So in the example of being an athlete, let's say you journal over the course of a year, you have 3 weeks out of the year where you're just on fire, unstoppable, untouchable, or 3 months, whatever. You're likely, if you're journaling during that time period, you would see what your mindset was, what you were thinking during that time frame. And it just gives you a whole new perspective of what you were doing. So you can reference that in the future. So you can build off of that long term, because just imagine what that would do for you if you were able to see your mindset in those key moments where you were just on fire, and you can see what you did or weren't doing to get to that point, and you just replicate that and build off of it. And that's really what the elite do, is they like stack their wins, because when you ride, they say ride the momentum, but what if you could bottle that momentum in one place and reference it whenever you need, and just continue building that box so that it's like essentially where you spend all of your time. Not always, of course, like we'll have ups and downs, but if you have this place where you can reference whenever you're in a rut or like a slump, or you could even essentially raise your standards so that instead of you being like a 6 out of 10 on a performance scale on average, you're a 7.5, 8 out of 10, or 9 out of 10, or 10 out of 10, right? Because you've gotten yourself to a place where you can reference back to your key high level performances, and you can use that in the future. So for me personally, what I really like about journaling is the value that it brings to seeing problems or situations in third person, meaning it's different because whenever you're in the day-to-day, you have this bubble around you that you are constantly in grind mode. You're like head down, keep on rocking and rolling. And it's hard to see you veer off track. It's hard to see yourself like get off the path of where you need to go. And with that, over a long enough period of time, you will find yourself way off, right? So if you take an analogy, I'm big on analogies. If you can't tell, if you've seen my content enough, you know this. So let's say you have two people. One person is walking in a straight line. He can see perfectly fine. The second person is blindfolded. And all you do is you take the second person, we'll call him Bob, and the first person, Joe. You take Bob and you take him 1 degree to the right. And you have them both walk a mile. Over the course of a mile, you will find that Bob is way off path, like miles off path, after they walk for, like a full day, right? Let's just say they're human, they're machines, they're human machines. And Bob ends up miles and miles and miles away because he just changed his direction a little bit. That's essentially what happens whenever you don't keep track of yourself and you don't see the performance that you're having over a long enough period of time, and you're not measuring your progress. Not to say that you have to like be super analytical. Rob Dyrdek does this where he'll track everything from the second he wakes up to the second he goes to sleep. It's kind of insane. If you If you haven't seen him or know of him, type in Rob Dyrdek, Dyrdek, I believe. And he's phenomenal. It's just like, it's wild how detailed he is. But he is able to optimize his day-to-day because he sees everything analytically. So going back to more like a practical takeaway, whenever you see things in a third person point of view, it gives yourself, that hands-on feedback that you would need, right? Because if you think about how we're doing everything day to day in our own bubble, we don't see the rut that we get ourselves into. And it's tough to identify areas that we need to improve long term. So you think about it as, what would be the advice that you would give yourself if you saw yourself on the street? I really like that point. And that's kind of what journaling does for me, is I'll write down a problem or something that I'm facing, and I'll just write it out. Like I'll just, let's say, for example, I'm having trouble in the athletic world, like hang cleans, right? I'm having trouble with workouts around like an exercise that I'm doing. I can't break past a certain barrier. I would then write out, what am I facing? And then just freehand, what do I need to do to like get past this? And then like practical steps, starting with lower weight, increase the rep range by 1-2 reps. Or if I'm lacking at distance within my sport, in this example, kicking, I would need to say, what can I do outside of, physically kicking to get myself stronger and closer to that range, more sprints. And then you write like game plans of sprints that you can do, and on and on. So essentially it'll help you practically and realistically bring the problem to light, and it can give yourself hands-on advice in your own perspective, own mind. And that goes a long way when it comes to developing yourself for the long term, because if you can apply that to real life, outside of your sport and personally, professionally, that brings a lot of assistance to navigating problems for yourself and for others, right? And if you're able to harness that ability to journal all the challenges or all the situations that you're working through, that really brings a lot of practical takeaways that you can use to progress. And I think that's a really big part of why personally I journal, but also other professionals that I've met do as well. So Jason Myers, Justin Tucker, there's a handful of professional kickers and punters that I've come across and met that have acclaimed a lot of their success to just being very analytical in their progress and their long-term development. Because again, finally hitting the horse in the head with this one is they'll track their performance, right? And by journaling and talking about their mental, thoughts during the day-to-day on like practices and even games, they're able to see, hey, this is an unreasonable thought. Now that I've made it real, it is no longer controlling me, and I am not my thoughts. That is just a opinion or something that comes and goes, right? So you give yourself a whole new perspective shift whenever you write them down, but you can also, like I said, see tangible takeaways over the long term of yourself journaling your progress in also in an athletic space, because you could see, hey, I was 15 of 20 on field goals this day, and I was 18 of 20 the next week, and I was 13 of 20 the week after. What was I doing in the 18 to 20 range that I was so successful in? And ideally, you would write down your mental notes of like what I did and what I didn't do. And that really gives yourself a whole new perspective, like I said, on the value of keeping track of everything. Hopefully that makes sense. And I hit that point hard enough in terms of like journaling itself and like practical parts. So we'll move on to the next section real quick. Now that we've covered the value of journaling, we're going to talk about the practical takeaways that you can use in your own daily life. So simply put, you could start with something simple, get out a piece of paper and just do 3 things that you're grateful for today. You could do a whole page of just stream of consciousness thought, meaning no filter, just write as much as you can about anything and everything that you can think of. And the whole point of this is like, I never really share my journal because it's like my personal thoughts. You can, but my thinking is it's for me and me only. And that allows you to be a lot more vulnerable and deep within your thinking, which allows you to get past your barriers, because a lot of times we're very confined or restricted to our thoughts. And I'm telling you, it's okay. Like, it's okay to give yourself a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you write about, because ideally, if you're doing this for yourself, you want to be as open as possible. So the more vulnerable you can be with your thoughts and your fears and your challenges, the better, because it allows you to grow. So writing, for me, I would just get a standard notebook, something like this is perfectly fine. Just a little composition notebook, and just leave it open and just have at it. So that would be my recommendation. You could set a timer for like 5 minutes and then bump it up to 10 and then 15 and 20 and 30. Some days, you can go a whole hour with just journaling straight. And, not to beat a dead horse, but there's a lot of value in it. It doesn't matter what you do or how you do it. It just matters that you get started. So after you've figured out what you want to do personally, like my opinion is you should then get a Google Doc or something that you can organize the best notes in. And you can either write them down in the Google Doc again, or you could just talk to text, something like that, just to summarize the points better. Because the best way that I've found, for me at least, is to write down the points, take those best and most valuable points, and then concisely wrap them up within a little talk to text or like message within Google Doc. And the way that it transfers over from handwritten to talk to text works really well, because you have to summarize what you learned in your own words on steroids, if that makes sense. So whenever you journal, it really helps, because handwriting journal, I'll be more specific, because it allows you, or it adds an extra layer of filtering. Because if you can just talk all day, that would eliminate a lot of the filtering that you would need to be concise with your point in journaling. So personally, like a physical journal works for that reason, but then I also like the digital version for the sake of conveniency, and you can like reference it later in the future. And then that way you can have a little bit more of a stream of consciousness within that, so you can reference it in the future. That's just how I do it. It's a little overkill, I guess you could say, because it's in two places, but I like to have a physical version to like as my starting point, and that's like the raw form of the journal. And then I go over to more of the digital, hey, like what, just talking out loud about the exact point that I just talked about. And it doesn't have to be for everything. Like I said, in the example of being an athlete, you could handwrite some key points that you were working on or facing within your sport. And then you can transfer those key points over to a Google Doc. You can expand on it a little bit more. You could keep it the exact same. It doesn't really matter. But again, that's what I did for my athletic career. Or you could just go straight to virtual. It doesn't really matter. Again, the point is that you get started somewhere. So hopefully that clears up a little bit about the process behind it. Again, it's open-ended, but I prefer Google Doc because it's like live, and you can add more features to it, and it's convenient because there's a lot of storage, and it's nice. But again, it doesn't have to be just for athletics. It could be for dieting, for goals, for workouts, before, after bed. You could do really any topic, and you can write about it at any point. Personally, morning works best because you have a little bit more mental clarity, and you're the most creative in the morning, typically, at least for me. I wake up, I usually drink some water, just stretch a little bit, and I'll get right into it. And that gives me the most, I would say, raw way of thinking, versus later in the day, whenever you're more fatigued and you let excuses get in the way, it just becomes a little bit harder the later in the day you go. So if I could give my personal recommendation, it would definitely be in the morning, because of the fact that you're so much more intuitive with your brain, and like you're just waking up, you're just starting to get the juices flowing, and it's a lot better for me, at least, because my creativity's usually at the highest point for the first like 3 to 4 hours of the day. So that would be my recommendation. But again, what works for me doesn't have to be what works for you. You could obviously try around with certain times of the day and mess around with it. But ideally, you want to make it as easy as possible. So if you're practicing, as an athlete, for an example, the second you get out of practice, you take those thoughts and you just make a note of them and put them in your notes. Some people have the luxury of having their phone with them during practice. Definitely do not like mess around with that. I would say, if you can, film yourself during your sport. I try to bring my phone to practice some days so I could have some teammates record me, and then I would take that recording, save it in an album within my phone, and then I would make a note on it for a second or two, just like maybe some one-off thought that I did during my best performance of the day. Like one of my best kicks, I would say, hey, this is what I did, this is how I felt, and this is what I'm going to do moving forward, and this is what I was thinking about, so on and so forth. So it gives you like practical advice of what to build on to like keep that momentum going. And that's really what being better in your sport is all about, is like being obsessed about what you do, but also having an art form of creativity and progression long term. Because if you're just doing the motions day in and day out over a long enough period of time, someone else that's more obsessed with developing themselves is going to be like outperform you. So whenever you can learn how to develop yourself for not only your sport, but also your personal life, the fact that you journal, I feel, is a superpower, because it can really become a lot of things. It can become a motivator, it can become a therapist, it can become your biggest advocate and your biggest problem solver. So all that to be said, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you sticking along with the duration of this video. If you did like this in some way, please like, comment, subscribe, engage in this with this in some way. Like I said, if you could do me a huge favor and subscribe if you're not already. About 80% of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so that would help me out an absolute ton. So thank you so much for watching again, and let me know what you guys want to see next. Peace.